The Iblis Stone, silenced by the Sky Ripper's core, had given Ronaldo enough power to challenge the Imperial fleet. But what Ronaldo was seeking was inner. The rebellion was on the verge of extinction, but it would have to wait. At the end of the mountain path, he found the wise Calaveras in his workshop. "Do you fix souls or only artifacts?" he asked the sage.
"Does your soul need fixing?"
asked the sage. "I've been killing a lot of ravens lately," he told the sage.
You're a fox,"
said Calaveras.
"To kill birds is part of your nature. Take joy in it. I mean, I might as well worry about eating flies. Would you like a fly?"
It was true. That's what he had forgotten. The joy. Now he was ready for the final battle. The Farfarer cut through the clouds. The air had never felt so sweet since he was a child. There it was. The dreaded Imperial fleet. He could smell wet hemp ropes ahead, wood and tar, and ravens. Even the fleet smelt good, somehow. He was ready. He was ready. Ronaldo had it all squared away in his head. He would kill the Emperor. Isengrim III had begun well, but he had gone mad. He was trying to invoke the lost gods by means of dark, blasphemous rituals. That was a secret. But the victims had spoken to Ronaldo. The ghosts had spoken. No anger. Ronaldo could not afford anger. It was empowering the crystal in his sword. That made him stronger, but it clouded his mind. He would not be a hero. A hero strives. Ronaldo would just be one with everything. The Emperor would die, and the wheel would turn, and all would be restored without rancor, without sorrow, without pain. From the mystical East could make time itself slow for you. The mysterious sword from the East made you so fast you could catch a fly with your chopsticks. If that's what you really wanted. right jewel could really give you an edge. The wrong, well, it still looked pretty, didn't it?
Felt like Tarzan.
But the more he thought about it, and he had so much more time to think about it now that he was not worrying about the battle, killing the Emperor would not change anything. Another would take his place. Perhaps Zenobia. Perhaps the Speaker of the Rebel Council, and power would corrupt them too, and death would make grief, and grief would lead to hatred. He must lead by example. Reject the violence. Reject the desire to create violence. But how? Sometimes, Renata really hated inanimate objects. This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. Finally, he came to the Emperor's ship. The path behind him was strewn with dead ravens. The path to enlightenment. His mistake, he realized, was trying to change the world. The world would spin and the wheel would revolve whether he strove against it or not. What he had to do was nothing. He had attained enlightenment. He sat down, adopted a full lotus position, and began to meditate. And all around him, the warriors stopped fighting too. They knew. They could feel his enlightenment. They gave up fighting, dropped their weapons, and became his disciples. No, just kidding. The nearest raven stabbed him with a sword and then chopped off his head. I might not have thought this through properly. Thought Renado's head as it rolled around the deck and died. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the Path of Destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renado knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renado had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renado really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Ah, Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? Trust a raven further than you could throw one. But did the drop count? People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Renado had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the raven's call about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice. Renado thought of the Iblis Stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts. Can't lose. His mother never let him wave his sword around at home. He guessed he was still compensating for that.
With all this ore, Ronaldo could forge a really great sword. He was a master forger. That probably wasn't the right word.
I hoped his mother wasn't watching. Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest. Ooh, what's there? thought Reynardo. Dirty and bloody, Reynardo finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Reynardo recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am! The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows. And that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Reynardo had already let that armature slip away to save Lapino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that. The core of the Sky Ripper? Lapino's excited. That's an actual thing that we could just go and get. You've been busy. He sure had. Reynardo told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. True, the core was capable of terrible, uncontrollable destruction. But this time, he was sure it would work great. It's beautiful here, thought Reynardo. It was nice to be back with his old war buddy. All right. Lapino was a traitor. But still, he was good company. You never knew where the road would take you, thought Reynardo.
I'll just have a dash, thought Renato. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Sweet. You could use this material to craft a spork. Or a sword. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones. No healthy ones. I'm getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lapina was right. Maybe she should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. A for effort, D for dead. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it. Tell you what, said Lapino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial Outpost. The Imperial Outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lapino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lapino was a touchy rabbit. Renato knew that. You're brave, I know, Renato said. But this is what I was hired to do. Oh, well, at least let me run ahead and warn them you're coming. Renato wondered if Lapino was up to no good. What if the rabbit warned the Empire instead? Oh, but Lapino wouldn't betray him like that. Not again. Before it'd been a fluke, right?
They finished the trip to the Nexus in silence. He would offer Lupino a chance to betray him, or not to. His old friend deserved another chance to prove true.
All right, Renato said. Go.
As Renato watched Lupino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building in him. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lupino? That was a recipe for disaster. Once you try it, you're hooked. Smashing things was fun. This stone was incredibly valuable. Renato could sense it. Also, it still had its price tag.
Reynardo felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound? Well, a death by sword was sudden and fair. This was just squalid. Piecemeal death, like old age. Reynardo wondered if it wasn't cheaper to build bridges and stairs.
Done a barrel roll, he thought, as he died.
Snack time, boys!
Caught the lead, Raven. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Reynardo found the mad rabbit cowering under a desk. The ravens, they must have known we were coming, said Lupino. How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base. Reynardo wasn't sure he believed that. But Lupino was talking so fast. He always seemed to make sense. The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there. But wait. Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. The core was killing him. He needed help. The sage, Calaveras, had given him the maps to find the armature and the core. If anyone knew the true name of the Transcendent Emperor, if anyone knew how to assemble the Sky Ripper, Calaveras did. If anyone could heal Reynardo and render the core safe, at least to its bearer, surely it was he.
The base of the mountain was the only safe place for a landing. He would have to continue on foot, muscles aching.
Calaveras was a scholar, not a doctor. Could he really save Reynardo from the poison radiating from the lost god's eye he was so recklessly carrying? Reynardo wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really, really long tentacles.
Or you shouldn't have.
Smash!
Oh, that was not a fun way to die. Even if he survived. No one would write ballads about the fox whose knees ached forever, would they? Not unless he paid for it. He hated paying for publicity.
Ice walls only let you through if they knew you were cool. There was an inscription. Praise the sun.
It was chilling walking through the living mountains. There was always noise up ahead. Insects, birds, the croak and flutter of ravens arranging ambushes. But close by, there was only the breeze and the trickle of melting snow. As if every living thing was holding its breath for his poisonous burden to move on.
Reynardo checked to make sure his sword was still working. Yep. one, Raven.
Incredible!
Caught another. Calaveras was a renowned scientist before he was forced into exile. Now he was practically the last scientist, and he was Renado's last hope.
The core! Splendid! Croaked Calaveras. Where's the armature?
Right, I was kind of hoping you wouldn't need it.
No, I don't. It's just a professional interest. We've got much better prismatics than the old TE ever did.
So Calaveras was an arcane engineer. He fussed at the core all day. He wrapped it with silver chains, and in front of it, he placed a huge, round ruby, so that it looked like a monstrous, floating eye. Ah, so, what is it?
Yeah, I call it the oculum. It's my very first death ray.
And it won't poison me?
Oh, no, it's completely safe now.
Anything I should watch out for?
Yeah, try to avoid pointing at any mirrors.
As he loaded the oculum onto the Farfarer, Bernardo was a little concerned about Calaveras. People who were utterly sure of themselves, he had found, were either experts or horribly wrong. Or both. But Bernardo only needed to fire the oculum once. He only needed to destroy one ship, the Emperor's ship, and the war was over. Bernardo plunged into the Imperial fleet. He felt the oculum humming. He no longer felt sick. This was going to be fun. Or at least, it was going to be over. Renato resisted the temptation to fire the oculum until the time came. He could sense its arcane energies yearning to escape the sage's wrappings. But it wasn't eating him alive. So that was a plus. He felt good about himself. He'd saved a friend, he'd helped the rebels, he'd relied on himself, but he'd listened to others. He felt like the right sort of hero. Wise, yet decisive. Calaveras had been so sure it would work. Maybe he could fire it just a few times. No harm in that, right? But only when he absolutely needed to.
Sharp? Check. Pointy? Check. Flexible? Check. What else do you need in a sword?
This chest had teaspoons stolen from every inn in Boreas. Oh, and something more useful.
Renado's arm was getting tired. The core was no longer eating at him, but he still felt weak. His stamina was shot.
But he had the oculum. When the ravens swarmed him, it would sometimes fire its death ray. It seemed to be warming up too, firing more and more often.
Maybe he should let it cool off. Yeah, he decided to stop using it entirely.
He'd once met a pirate captain. He used hooks to get around his ship. What was his name again? A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that.
oculum was still hot to the touch. He almost thought it was getting even hotter. Well, that was ridiculous, of course. Anyway, he'd only to fire it one more time, and then he could chuck the whole contraption into the abyss, and the Emperor's ship was now in range. Reynardo squinted. He could make out the line of ravens protecting the ship. Zenobia in front, conjuring. And on the deck, yes, that was His Imperial Majesty, pacing in his golden armor. Reynardo lined up his shot and fired. Caught in the beam, the ship burst into flames. The ravens and Zenobia exploded. The Emperor, too, exploded. Reynardo waited for the beam to stop, but it only got brighter, and the oculum hotter. Frantic, Reynardo pulled the oculum towards the abyss. The ruby burst into flames. The shiny metal casing glowed, then melted. That was good. Now the core could cool off, right? Reynardo ran. The blast incinerated him instantly, along with both fleets. The shockwave could be felt across all Erda. That winter, with neither Empire nor rebels to rule them, the islands slid into banditry. And so began the Second Age of Darkness. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. There would be a way to win. Reynardo could feel it. He'd have to explore choices he'd never made before he could figure it all out, though. And with that, the book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Pete. Lupino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens?
Who's your next of kin? Just wondering.
People were frightened these days. Just 2 weeks past, Reynardo had sneaked through an empty town and listened to the ravens caw about the Emperor's new taste in ritual sacrifice.
Reynardo thought of the Iblis stone and shivered. He had no business messing with ancient, cruel artifacts. What he needed was his friends around him. Clear eyes, full hearts, and loot.
Magical jewel. Reynardo couldn't wait to find a workbench.
Ah, the road less traveled, thought Reynardo. How intriguing.
Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling. Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Well, unless he really was a traitor, obviously. Then they'd probably pin a medal on his chest.
we do it, said Renato to himself. Lapino would betray him. But now Renato knew that. What would Lapino do if he knew that Lapino was going to betray him? Well, he'd concoct some crazy scheme, wouldn't he? That used Lapino's betrayal against him, and it would blow up in his face. Maybe he was overthinking this. Well, that would be a first. This one looked familiar. Had he lost this one in a card game? Welcome back, he thought. Found a Superman issue #1 in mint condition in a jar he'd broken. He planned to keep breaking things until he had the whole series. Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized it. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. Zenobia was... The city was already under Zenobia's control. I had to admire her efficiency. Renato shivered at the thought of Zenobia at the mercy of the interrogators. Would he really turn her over to them? But this was war. It wasn't meant to be pretty. This was the nice part of town, but the ravens had been through here. They like to take shiny things home to their nests.
To gravity for me.
So that's what they meant by a firewall. What unlocks a firewall? It was definitely easier to fight inanimate objects. Why was Lupino urging him to capture Zenobia? Obviously it was a trap. But you never knew how Lupino thought. Sometimes his plans were so convoluted they did the exact opposite to what Lupino wanted. And there must be some way to play on that, Renato thought. Hey, why don't you guys fight in groups? Oh, I know. Because there's no I in team. Renato had once invested in a jewel store, but it lost money because someone kept robbing it. It was him.
So, what's this plan of yours? Use me as bait, said Lupino. And he outlined a slightly complicated plan that involved geese, a net, setting the Farfarer a little bit on fire, Lupino dressing as an old blind toad, and Renato hiding inside a monstrous watermelon. What could possibly go wrong? Thought Renato. Oh, go ahead. I'm sure you know better, said Lupino. Where was a workbench when you needed one? Oh, never mind. Coming back to him. He wondered what he'd remember next.
Renato had heard stories of a dungeon where chests were filled with potions and weapons. Fairy tales. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She became smoke. And he noticed he had a blade to his throat. "Stay a while," purred a familiar voice. "Did you really think you could capture me?" Zenobia said as her ship lifted off. "Now I just wanted some privacy," Renato said. "Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you?" And he told her why. His Imperial Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. They could make him immortal. To seal the bargain, he needed a sacrifice. Someone who truly loved him. "You're lying." She was furious. "You can't prove that." "I can." And so they set sail for the Nexus. The scientists at the observatory have resurrected one of his victims. Well, he's not exactly alive, but it can talk, and it can't lie. You took a big risk. You know, I could just cast a spell to make you tell me where the rebel base is, and you wouldn't consider that cheating? She frowned. Ugh, fine. Let's go get your witness. The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Renato had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them. Renato remembered when he'd first stolen one of these. Good times.
She caught up with him. Don't you think I'd know if my father started practicing black magic? Why? Would you want to join in? Oh, no, I'd destroy his books and... All right, I suppose I wouldn't.
She stopped, troubled. He ran on. Renato had been searching for a way to save the rebellion. Lupino wanted to capture and interrogate Zenobia. But if he could show her proof of her father's madness, maybe she would join the rebellion. Imagine if you built a house on one of these things. Oh, that would be amazing. It would be like having a boat. Nothing gets your blood pumping like a bit of killing.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken care to burn the reanimated witness to cinders. Zenobia stared around, shocked. The scientists had been neutral. They had no part in the rebellion. "Take me to your council," she said, shaken. "I have things to tell them." It was what Renato had gambled on. The Zenobia would turn against her father once she knew his madness. But the rebel base was secret. Could he really risk taking the Emperor's daughter there? Renato reached Lapino by Farspeaker Toad, the one creature the Ravens had left alive at the observatory. Lapino seemed awfully anxious to meet him at the secret base. If he was a spy for the Empire, he'd turn around and reveal the coordinates to the Empire, jeopardizing the entire rebellion. But Renato couldn't bear to think that Lapino would commit such horrible treachery. There was still good in the Mad Rabbit. He felt sure of it. "I'll meet up with you at the base," Lapino said through the Toad. "Good thinking." Renato gave him the coordinates. "There's a shuttle here I can borrow." Renato found Zenobia in the chart room. "I've been having awful dreams," she said. "Dead kittens and worse. I thought they were only dreams, you know. Why would anyone want the lost gods back? In those days, the favorite of a god could become immortal." She held herself and shivered. "He wants to become an eater of souls." "Well, I'm not afraid of dying. Just dying of boredom," Renato said, but she didn't laugh. Silence fell as they flew towards the ruins of the city of Ubar, where the rebellion leadership was hiding. If Zenobia couldn't help them fight off her father, no one could. As they touched the ground, he could smell the ravens and hear their hungry caws in the distance. "They're probably looking for me," she said. "You go on ahead." She had that fiery look in her eyes that he'd always loved. It was a bit odd, though. How easy she'd been to convince. It was what he'd gambled on, but he'd expected more of an argument. She'd always loved to argue. She considered it the fastest way to the truth. Maybe she'd long suspected the truth. Sometimes all it took was taking the bandages from your eyes. That must be it, he told himself. The platform used a hybrid propulsion system fueled by anti-gravity and wishful thinking. They caught their breath under a ruined arch. "It's beautiful," she said. "This was the library of Ubar," he said. "Your father's ravens thought they had an ancient book." She nodded. Was she crying? This was exactly what I wanted, Renato thought. To turn her to our cause. So, Why do I feel something is terribly wrong?
Because nothing ever goes this smoothly, is why.
Sleep tight, thought Renato.
Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
The new pathway made Renato curious. Council toads swarmed around Zenobia, shocked she was there, shocked she had changed sides. Then, the walls exploded. He heard toads croaking, "Oh, the ravens!" Blackbirds were pouring through holes everywhere. "It's a trap!" cried the council speaker. In the confusion, he saw flashes of magic. Then Zenobia being hustled off by Imperial troops. So, she had betrayed him after all. Renato ran for his ship. The Farfarer flew into the clouds, barely losing the Imperial ravens pursuing him. The rebellion was lost, and he had lost it. There was nothing to do but find Zenobia and make her pay for her treachery. His heart ached. He still loved her. But he had trusted her, and he had been a fool. She would be back at the fleet, gloating with her mad, bloodthirsty father. For all Renato knew, she was helping him bring back the old, lost gods back from their exile. Renato landed in the middle of the Imperial fleet. The rebels were losing badly.
Without leadership, it was a slaughter. Renato felt strangely free, trying not to think about how he had lost the war, trying not to think about how he had loved Zenobia, blinded himself to her treachery.
That's what it meant to be a hero. To keep on fighting after the most bitter of betrayals. To never know if you could trust anyone. Cats. What a waste of fur.
Led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense.
No skateboarding, the sign said. What had happened to Lupino? Had the Mad Rabbit fled to safety? Or was he forlornly carrying on with the few rebels Renato could see here or there? It didn't matter anymore. All there was slash and spin, parry and lunge, over and over as he fought his way across the fleet. All there was finding the girl he'd once loved, who had used his love against him and putting as big a hole in her heart as she'd left in his. Don't look down, he thought. Suddenly, Zenobia was there, advancing a Lupino. So the mad rabbit had survived. "Save me, or I'm done for!" screamed Lupino. Zenobia turned, showing her teeth in a smile. "You're alive!" Renato ran towards the witch. "Lupino's the one who betrayed you!" she shouted. "He warned my father!" Before he could think, Renato sank his sword into the sorceress. She stared at him, heartbroken. "No! Lupino's the traitor!" Renato had an awful, sinking feeling in his stomach. Then, he felt a knife in his back. "I'm afraid she's right," said the Mad Rabbit. "Ain't I a stinker?" Then, the sun went out. Damn it! He should go back to some of the choices he'd faced before. Maybe there were new paths that had opened up, like those doors he was opening up all over the map that took him to new treasures and around his enemies. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again, faster than before, and he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion